Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another Monday of To an Imperfect Union. Uh, Looking on Facebook, it would be the political consciousness of West Coast Steeler fan. I was actually looking around today, well, over the last, since Friday actually, and I was looking for some of the topics that we might talk about today. And while looking at the different media, social as well as news media, I found that it seemed like the world, as well as the U.S. citizens here, are concerned about three things: the war in Ukraine, up until Saturday, whether or not Coach K was going to win, was going to retire as a national Duke, was going to retire as a national championship. The immigration situation uh, here on the south border, education, but on a more local level. But and also the Judge Ketanji Brown situation. Now, excuse me, let me get things a little better situated here. Um, that's not to belittle any of these particular situations. But we still have problems here at home. And you can believe that there's one station that is covering this, especially from a right wing stance, and that's Fox News. Fox News is talking about inflation. Fox News is talking about the upcoming 2022 and 2024 elections and putting their people in place. Fox News is talking about immigration and the brown scare here on the border. While CNN, CNBC, MSNBC are all covering the war in Europe, mostly, the January 6th insurrection, but the GOP, DeSantis, is making sure that you don't hear the word gay. But let's see. We have same-sex marriage. We have all types of legislation being passed for the protection of LGBTQ communities. Maybe kids have changed. And while we would like to think it's for the better because they have more tools at their disposal, uh, there's many more things that we let our kids be exposed to at quite an earlier age. We have a problem with the word. Now, I, I know a lot of people are really tired of hearing about how old I am, but let's kind of take the word gay and bring it down through an evolution from my perspective. When I was 6 years old or younger, maybe around the age of 4, as I've told many times, my aunt was the owner of a uh, school of cosmetology. So at a very young age, I knew um, the terms bulldagger. I knew the term faggot. I knew the term. We hadn't gotten to the gay stage yet, but I see Dr. Casey is here. Hello, Dr. Casey. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm going through the evolution of gay from my perspective.
I don't think we were. I mean, when I was younger, I knew people were gay, I guess, but it really wasn't a thing that was like allowed or accepted. Even I don't know.
Right,
Um,
right. See, and that's even 40 years. And I'm just gonna roughly, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt and say 40 years younger than I am. But uh, as you mentioned, and as I've said before, my aunt was one of the very few women black women that had her own school of cosmetology. So I grew up in around a bunch of women, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But that's a different story. Any- anyway, but I mean, you had maybe one or two women that would come to class kind of dressed like men. And by men, back in those days, if you wore anything other than a dress, you know, it was cause for some suspicion.
I
We'll
mean,
put it like that.
it's weird because when you think about Prince and some artists that were more flamboyant and more androgynous, nobody really had a problem with it because Prince had hoes.
but see that was the difference though. See, Prince was outside of the norm. Prince, like you say, Prince had hoes.
I mean, amen.
You know, Prince. But but once again, if you go back, and you look back at the 50s and the 60s and the 70s,
Oh yeah,
and
they used to wear all type of
right,
blouses.
and you look at the pimps, you understand. I remember my first pair of platform shoes.
I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
just like looking and thinking back, like, yeah, like even when I see it, it's an old picture of the Isley brothers that float around
Right,
where they
right,
got the blouse and they get it tied up like how women tie their blouses up. So it's kind of weird because like I had an uncle, he was gay. I don't know when he came out. He had a son and he was married before, but he ended up being gay and he moved to California. Rest his soul. But it was not like one of those things that people talked about. You just knew that he was, gay or whatever. It was like,
right,
it was
right.
it's weird because I mean, I can think of people like women that I knew growing up that were more like butch or like manly. Um
And that's
that
what you call them,
definitely
butch.
probably had girlfriends at some point or another. But again, it was like one of those don't ask, don't tell type of things.
Right, right. But you knew,
Mhm. I mean, you
and
can tell most times.
right, right, and like it was there were certain occupations that were set aside for those type of people. To a certain there was more of a stereotype back during my age than there was in your early period.
It
But but
is for me right
but
now, it is very surprising to see how many lipstick lesbians there are. I mean, like women that are very, they look like women, they're very dolled up, but they don't like men. I have personally been doing a lot of research, moving into becoming a sex coach and a sex educator because I see a lot of things in the industry. And I was trying to figure out, is this the industry or is this just people? And
right.
it is a different world outside of what religion tells us we are supposed to believe. Because outside of religion, people are into a lot of different things that most people don't realize, are a reality for people.
But now I asked this question probably about 7 years ago
Mhm.
when I first started kind of getting into this uh, on a serious basis, because that was when you saw a lot of women, even more than men, coming out. And uh, uh, I know it's not cribbing after dark, but I, uh,
You should be able to
I,
talk a little bit
I,
about things that push
I,
women.
I, I, I understood women liking women, and that goes
Mm.
into, of course, you know, my deviant background, if you want to call it that. But the the feel, the touch, the taste of a woman is something that appeals to me. So I
Mhm.
can understand it being
Appealing to a
for
woman.
appealing right
You know
to a
what?
woman.
Let me be honest with you, James. I think the exact same way when I see men who are in love with men because I was like, I've watched a little bit of all type of porn, just educational wise, but when I saw it and it wasn't like a force field, it was an enjoyment. And I was like, well, I've experienced sex like that before, so I could see how you could fall in love with it. Like I
But
get it. I get
now,
it.
but now I I
I mean,
do
it's the same
I
difference from your
I
perspective and a
right
woman and my
right
perspective when it's a man in that
right
situation.
right. But I have trouble. I still, even at in this age
Is
of
it because of
enlightenment,
your time in
it,
jail?
possibly, possibly, but also the whole dynamic of what a man meant in 1950, in 1960, as to what a man means now. And we've kind of talked about it when I was talking about, men getting in touch with their feminine side. And, like, it was, I think I was,
See, but
well,
James, back then you weren't even allowed to show any type of emotions. You were
right,
forced to be hard, or you got beat, or whatever the punishment was for not being a tough guy.
right,
And
right.
that
You,
could
you
be as
couldn't,
damaging as
you,
expressing your feminine energy.
you until I probably got at least 40 years old,
Mhm.
I was ashamed to cry in front of my woman. And this was because I thought she would feel that I was weak. Men don't cry. Men, yo, women cry. I console you when you cry. You don't console me because I am the pillar. I'm the pillar of strength. I
But
can't
the
let you see
strongest
me in.
thing is to be
I
able to
can't
be
let you see
emotional.
me in a vulnerable position.
Mhm.
Okay. So now I come down to, and even before you get to Prince, there was a guy named George Clinton.
Mhm.
George and George, there was nothing feminine about George whatsoever, but George wore, nail polish. George, George wore all kinds of colors in his hair. George, you might see George dressed up in anything. He was, and then you come down to Dennis Rodman,
See,
who's,
but Dennis Rodman,
well,
he's his
no, no,
own person. Did he I think he actually ended up coming out as being bisexual.
right, right, but
I love Dennis Rodman, by the way. He was always my favorite player. I liked his defensive skills and his roughness in the game.
all, all of that was good, but what is a bisexual? If you kiss a man, you're gay. This is
Yeah,
this
but
is
you can
no, I'm not talking about thinking back in my day. Now I'm not talking about progress. I'm not talking about progressive thinking. I'm talking. I'm talking about archaic thinking. Because it was hard for me to get my head around Dennis Rodman being a bad boy, a bad bee maybe, but not a bad boy. Okay. I mean, these were just things that did not fit in the norm. And if it
see,
didn't fit
but
in, and if it didn't fit in the norm, you were afraid of it. So therefore you didn't know what category to put it in.
which is what I was about to say. Growing up, when you would think about that, it was like you didn't know what to think of it, so you wouldn't know what to say or what to, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, because you knew it happened, but you didn't know, like, okay, it was like one of those things, like, oh my God, I can't even look that way. Like, what are they doing? I can't look. Oh my God. Oh, wait a minute. But that's
But
how porn is in general now, where people are not being exposed to enough sex to where they feel like, especially church people, oh my God, like, if it ain't about, if we ain't married or if we ain't doing it to have babies, and I can't look at sex. But no, you need to be familiar and get educated about what it is and all of that through exposure. I think that you should view porn to some extent so that you can familiarize yourself. And I'm not talking about with unrealistic expectations, thinking somebody gonna do all that crap, because some of it ain't real. But you should. It's educational. You need exposure to it.
see, Doc, I was one of them. If I saw it, I wanted to try it. And back then, I mean, come on, I mean, now,
Is it
you,
because of the
you can get up close and personal now. I mean, even porn has changed. You know,
yeah,
it
yeah.
did. You,
See,
know,
but
I
it
mean,
it has changed over time because I remember being little, like, under 8 years old probably, and I used to watch porn back in the day, and there was a time where they used to show penis on, Showtime, HBO, and then it changed from showing any male and female intercourse to showing all
you
lesbian
couldn't
type of
show
thing.
any genitalia at all.
Well, they'll show female parts, but they won't show me. Well, they might have changed again since when after that, because that it was like it went into phases. But when they stopped showing all of that, I think that's when Playboy channels and all of those channels really
Right.
start picking up and becoming more of a thing.
Right. But then the porn industry became soft porn as of course the
Mhm,
hard porn but
mhm,
anyway
mhm,
like I
mhm.
said you know uh if uh if I got to put a quarter in the machine, it's porn. Okay.
Well,
It's,
I know we're not gonna stay on this subject for long, but Twitter is the best place to find authentic sexual interaction.
yeah, and Facebook is not as bad, but I mean,
Well, no,
but anyway,
Facebook has shut down in a great number of areas, for the large part, but on Twitter, it's the Wild Wild West.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm
But
telling you, it's crazy over there because they don't
but
censor you.
but one of the questions that and again something that we touched on last week, and I think it was part of your final remarks, was the state of Florida and uh, how uh, sexuality is not taught uh, in what was it, K through 6?
Well, that's what that bill is that was just signed is, they're calling it the "Don't Say Gay" bill, but I don't even think it said gay in the bill actually, from
No,
what I've heard,
that's
'cause I
that
did not read
that
it myself. But the bill, from my understanding, is geared around not exposing very small kids to, what sexuality is before they need to learn that in school, which I support 100%.
okay. Now, and 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 thinking of your thoughts last week is what made me come back to this subject, because maybe once again thinking about my generation, my first my first sexual education, if you want to call that, was either by my peers
Mhm.
or by some type of forbidden. Well, to give you an example, when I was 6 years old, my cousin got married, and her and her husband's bedroom was right next to mine.
Mhm.
So for the first 6 weeks, I wanted to know why I was hearing this bumping up against my wall. Okay. So when I went down and asked my mama, my
What your
stepmother,
mama said.
the first thing she said was she told them that they had to move their bed on the other wall. That was
Right.
the first that was the first thing she said. Yeah. The other thing that she said is that it, it's all about the birds and the bees, and when you get old enough, I'll talk to you
Talk
about
to you about it.
it. Right.
See, I used to listen to my cousins. I used to get babysit a lot because my mom worked third shift. And I have heard probably most of my first cousins have sex at some point, and especially the older ones, and probably my mom a few times. I don't know why they always assume the children are asleep when they making all that racket, but that is never the case.
Right.
As soon as
And
you start going, it's like, "Whoa, what is going on over there?"
and then one night I got a little curious and kind of eased open the door a little bit. And I'm like, wow, like, mm, I can't wait till I get old enough to do that shit. Then, you know,
Yeah.
it seemed like she liked it, and now the bed's on the other side of the wall, so I can see everything now. I don't have to
Oh
worry
my
about
god.
it. There's nothing left to the imagination. You
I am
know,
wondering if that is what can influence a person that gravitates towards sex that is um a love language, because I mean they say affection in itself, but for some people sex in general is what seems to be what makes people feel like they're loved. I mean, aside from just the act and the physicality of it.
but also, there's also that thing where we confuse sex with love. So,
Right.
but uh, you know, what I guess I was
I
asking.
mean, but no, that was my point. What is making people confuse the two other than seeing somebody else feel loved by the having sex? You know what I'm saying? Like if you see your parents, or if you see somebody that's fussing or fighting, or this is what they say that they're doing because they love each other, then that can make you feel like, well, in order to show somebody I love them, I have to do that too.
Yeah, but then you also hear about these loveless marriages where it's like hurry up and get through. I've never been in that situation, so I don't understand because I mean, if you do something that makes me feel good, don't do it. Ain't no about
I don't
hurry up.
know that either, because even when I was, in married and going into divorce, I was into it, even though when we would be fussing or fighting or arguing ever, like, I wanted to get my rocks off just as much as he
and,
did.
and,
Yeah, so,
hey, nothing like makeup sex. I don't give a
I
damn what they
mean,
say.
I mean, until I am one of those type of people though that if my mind feels abused, like it once I don't like you no more,
Oh,
then
that's well,
I
well,
just totally
yeah,
shut down. So
yeah,
either you better get me while I really like you,
yeah,
or you're
yeah.
not gonna
Well,
last long around here.
yeah. I understand that, but but kind of getting back to what I was saying originally. Do you think? I mean, like I know you're all for it, but don't you think that most kids are more influenced by their peers and their actual life than they are by what is taught in school? And are there any schools that actually teach this? I mean, I know this is something that you don't want to be taught, but is this something like putting
I've never
the
heard of
horse
anybody
before
actually
the
teaching
cart?
it.
Because I've never heard of this being taught.
I haven't heard of it being taught either, but what I will say is that children are exposed to certain things from their peers. However, in today's society is less likely to be exposed between kindergarten and third grade. That's pretty young, in which they're trying to introduce that into the school system. Now, I don't know if somebody was actually teaching that or if they're kind of being proactive with it, but I definitely know that about that 7-year old TV show mark is when they start introducing that type of stuff into TV. So it's one of those things that I really hated as my children were getting older. Like I don't want them learning that from somewhere else. I need to be the person that teach them that, but I would also express that to my children. Like you shouldn't be watching two children on there showing you about anything. I should be teaching you that, because what if you're not ready to learn that yet? Everybody at in kindergarten is not on the same mental level. Everybody in the third grade, everybody in the seventh grade is not necessarily ready to learn that.
Right, right. And like I said, I think this is something that is more proactive because I've never even in the so-called like Sesame Street or
Mhm,
any of those PBS channels. I've never seen that particular part taught,
mm-mm. I don't
and
know where that, bill came from, but it has normally, from my observation, there is normally something that happened that made them say, "Well, wait a minute, we need to put this in writing because they about to go out of control." And in
well,
Florida, it wouldn't surprise me.
but they also said the same thing about CRT, and as you know, CRT is not taught in public schools.
Not to the level that they trying to, act like
No,
it is.
no, so like I said, I mean, I think some of this, has to do, maybe if you want to call it, like you say, a preemptive strike, and maybe, this is, there's a certain amount of fear mongering there because I'm not going to say that there were a lot of kindergartners or kids between 3 and 5 up watching the Oscars, but there were certainly some kids between the ages of 10 and 12.
Probably, mhm,
You know,
more than likely.
I mean, and uh,
I
and
mean,
and,
when I
and
was a
let,
child, that was like a thing to do.
right, right. That it was a family kind of thing. You all sat down and maybe mom popped the popcorn and you wanted to know who was coming on and things like that. So it was more of a family event. Uh, and I think that was more devastating than this Florida bill. Not. See, I see you shaking your head there. But now let's think about it. What would you rather explain to your child? Why Will Smith went up there and smacked Chris Rock?
And knock some sense into Chris Rock, old cooning ass.
Like I said, Chris Rock right now, his tour, he done doubled the price of his tickets and he sold out every show. Will everything that Will has on or in production is now on pause.
That's just
So
because they being over dramatic. I heard somebody say this today, and I will mimic exactly what they said. They watch people on Real Housewives of Atlanta slapping each other, beating each other up. They be watching all these reality shows of all this great violence, and now Will Smith smacked the sense into somebody about his wife, which he is supposed to damn do, and now everybody is devastated. Y'all didn't
man,
see more fight. Y'all didn't see more people get killed by the police than them. So you comfortable with seeing people get killed by the police, getting gunned down, but oh, Will Smith make you uncomfortable because he smacked somebody about his wife. He did what he was supposed to do. Forget them people and forget whatever. And I feel like this. This is how I feel. Whatever is at stake about me and mine, I'm okay with that. If I lose it all to protect this, then I lost. It was worth it. They gonna lose money. Will straight.
oh
Will
yeah,
money is
we'll,
coming.
we'll straight out. Hey, I do agree with that, but like I said, anytime my woman got to look at me in order for me to act like a man, there's got to be something wrong there. Got to
No,
be
it
something
doesn't.
wrong.
It does not
Yes,
have
yeah,
to be
yeah,
that strong. No, it does
yeah.
not.
Well, that's your view as a woman. As a man, if you have to correct me as a man in order to make me act like a man, then
How is that
evidently
correction? How is that correction? He was
be
already in mid laugh.
hold on, because Will laughed at the joke. If she had not given him that colored woman look, Will would
He was
still be sitting.
already laughing.
Will would be sitting in his chair right now, being the same soft ass that he was
That didn't
before the
happen,
show.
and that's the reason. That is the that what you just said right there about him being soft is the exact reason why I'm happy
and
that he's not the shit out of Chris Rock. That's why I'm happy that he did it because you thought he was soft
he's
until he
still
smacked the
soft.
shit out
And
of his
he's
ass.
still soft. He went. He
I
picked
bet
up.
you ain't nobody else
He
gonna
picked.
try him.
I bet that, like I said, I would be willing to bet if it had
I'm
been
happy you did it.
anybody. If I, I'm happy that you're happy, but like I said, if my woman got to give me a look to make me feel like a man, then evidently I wasn't a man to begin with. Miss Sims, how are you
That's
doing this
all.
evening?
Greetings all, greetings all.
Miss Sims, Miss Sims, we started
You're
out
you're
talking.
dealing with you're messing with Dr. Case again.
I'm not.
Now
I'm not.
that,
I'm not. I'm not messing with Dr.
no,
Casey.
you're having a
I'm
conversation,
taking.
just joking.
I'm taking this from the perspective of a man that grew
Of
up
a
in the
macho
50s
man.
and
We
60s.
already
Right.
know
Right.
that
Right.
James do not believe in showing emotions as a man. He don't believe that a woman should be able to make any type of suggestions or any type of
No. No.
anything.
No.
You
No.
can't
Hold on.
you
You
can't see
you
a
you
man
can
do
make
nothing
you
because if you
you
show
can
any
make
type of
plenty of
anything, then they
suggestions.
weak.
You can make plenty of suggestions. You can take your high heels off and put them up in my lap, and I rub your feet. You can you you can.
If a woman got to
But
do that for you to rub her feet, then you weak in that area. Because if
oh,
you was
hey,
already
hey,
if you was
hold,
who you
hold,
were supposed to be, she wouldn't have to do that. You would take the initiative to
hey,
do it. Same
th-
difference.
th- yeah, and this was also something. This was also something that I had to learn in life and with women because, come on, how many times I looked at my grandmama's feet? I seen them corns and calluses. Ain't no times you could tell me that my grandpa went and rubbed my grandmama's feet. You cannot tell me that. But as I got older and I like, oh yeah, well, like look here, like, damn, maybe if I rub her feet a little bit, I can get from second base to third base. Yeah, so you know that all becomes part of your game as you grow along in life.
So why
Miss
can't what
Sims,
Will did be the same part of his game as he's growing along in life? Because he's allowed enough people to try him and his wife through his whole career. They've been talking shit about Will Smith. At what point did he stand
hold
up
on,
for
hold on,
himself
hold on, hold on,
on his
hold
own?
on, hold on. His wife said
You
publicly that
making it about his wife,
huh?
and it's about him as a man. At any time,
No, it's about his
if
wife.
he sees that his wife is uncomfortable, he's supposed to correct that situation. Pinpoint blank. Period.
Okay, well,
Period. If somebody make your wife uncomfortable right now, your ass is gonna chin check it. Don't act like you won't, James. Stop it.
most definitely because that's
Okay,
my
so
wife.
let it go. So
But
leave Will alone if
but
you would act
but
the same way.
but I don't have the same
If you would
reputation
act
as
the
a
same
soft
way, it
ass,
don't matter if
so
you would act
forth
the
as
same way.
Miss
If you would
Sims.
act the same way, it's the same thing.
What do you think about this? Uh,
Well, from last
He's
week,
saying he would act the same exact way, Miss Sims. He would do the same exact thing, but when Will do it, it's a problem. That's
no, no,
crazy.
no, no,
well,
no, 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 no,
no,
no,
this
no, no, no. What I said was, if I had to wait on my wife to
Mm-mm.
give me that
That's
look.
not what I asked you.
No,
That's
no,
not
no,
that
no,
was
no,
not
no,
the question.
let's put it in context now. I said that, yeah, if you disrespect my wife, yeah, I'm gonna chin check you.
That's it.
But
That's it. You
but
don't need
oh no,
nothing
no,
else
hold on,
because that's it.
hold no,
When
no,
he
no, no.
seen that
But
she was
but but
disrespected,
it does
then
but
he
it
checked
does
it.
but
Period.
it does not take my wife to
To,
tell me
to, to say
that
that she
she's
felt
been disrespected.
how
As a
can you read
man,
her
I
mind
should
so
know.
you can read her mind and say when she feel
I don't
disrespected and
I
when she
don't
don't feel disrespected?
I don't have to read her. The man, if you
Man, James, you full
disrespect,
of shit right now. Come on.
I-
Okay, Miss
no,
Sims. Come
no.
on.
If
Go
you
ahead, Miss
did,
Sims. He full of
if
shit
you,
right now.
if no, if you
He full of it.
disrespect
He full of it.
my wife, then you disrespect me.
Okay,
But,
so the
but,
moment that
but,
she
but,
felt disrespected and he realized that she felt disrespected, he handled it just like you said you would. But when it's Will Smith, it's a
but I'm not
problem.
going,
Now,
but
crazy.
because I'm not going to laugh first. I'm not going to laugh first at the joke and then get mad because she
You
looked
was
at me.
already laughing at what was being said.
all
It
right.
Go
was
ahead,
a
This is
Miss
where I'm.
moment
Sims.
comedy
This
that
is where I'm.
everybody was already laughing at.
This is where I'm coming from. And contrary to what you thought last week, James, I was not the only one that did not watch this. What was going on? And the next day, it came about that there were plenty of people that didn't watch the
Oh, I didn't
Oscars.
watch it. I didn't
Uh,
watch it. I was watching the basketball game. I
okay,
admitted that.
but what? Let me finish. But what? I was surprised at a lot of people different reactions to it, and this is the perspective I put it in. Something like this, and there are people that watch things like this, that entertainment and enjoy things like that, so be it. But for me, my perspective is this, that we saw some off behind the screens at home behavior from two people, and I'm talking going to be with the behavior. My perspective is, if I say to America, listen, America, don't take your eye off the prize. The prize is not Will Smith and Chris Rock. The prize that's going on is a lot of political stuff that people may be gaining on you to keep you from voting, to keep money out of your pocket, that may be going on, things that are going on locally. So for me, uh, I'm not going to give a lot of time and attention to what's going on, but I was surprised at a lot of different people's reaction to it. Like, I was appalled. I mean, some people thought, felt expressed like they just almost fainted from it. To me, they're taking, and as I'm talking about behavior, because I don't watch either one of those careers and follow. I go back to the behavior. What and like I said, what you saw was off the screen, behind us, scene at home, negative behavior from two different people. The earth did not stop revolving around the sun. The sea still rushes towards the shore. And so that's it for me. And like I say, my time and attention is on political things here, that I'm giving my time and attention to bills that are going through the legislature, and thinking about, you know, boots on the ground, what's happening, boots on the ground. But one of the things that for me, all this came to a head, and I've thought about this through the years. I haven't heard anything, people, the little that I heard, I haven't heard any negative comments on Chris Rock's behavior. And to me, in looking at the behavior, like, I think a lot of things were set in. It's kind of like the domino effect. When the slap came, the domino effect occurred. But someone has to take an action to move those dominoes, and Will Smith, did that. But I thought, even through the years, to me, when I go back to the real crux of things, the behavior to me was like a bully. To me, Chris Rock was showing kind of bullying behavior that people show towards that bullies show towards people that they think they can get over on. And through the years, I've always not felt good about the liberty that comedians take in making fun of other people, whether oversized people like me, or people that walk with a limp, or whatever. And to me, in a sense, that's bullying behavior. But as a society, we have accepted that and laughed at it, when these people do this. But what about the people that are affected by it? I mean,
Mhm.
people that are overweight, people that have one limb, or this and that. So when I say bully behavior, a bully will pick at and do things to intentionally aggravate someone that they feel is not going to respond back. But if and when that person responds back, then that bully behavior has to take what's coming at him. And then that doesn't stop the bullying behavior. He just takes that bullying behavior and turns it towards somebody else. And that's I mean, his comedy, the behavior of making fun, or using other people to, to make his money with, to show to really the negative behavior that could be devastating to people, uh, still continues, and he's making money from it. That's why, one reason why I said, the that's not the prize. Keep your eye on the prize, America. The prize is not what's going on within that entertainment arena, and people are reacting to it, which I would expect. But I'm not going that route. My perspective is what I just said in terms of my time and attention to that is
You know,
after this after
yeah.
this broadcast. I won't be talking about it anymore.
No, I'm kind of glad you put it in that perspective because I feel that you know once it's over, it's kind of over. I mean, and like you said, neither the average person's life is not going to be affected by it, you know. But it's a good diversion. One of the
And
things when I looked, go ahead, Dr. Casey.
that is easier to explain than explaining anything else that we talked about when it comes to sexuality. It is very much easier to explain a man wanting to protect his wife up under whatever circumstances, whether he was pressured, forced, or whatever based on their relationship. That is very easy to explain that a man felt like his wife was attacked in any type of way, mentally, spiritually, visually, and he wanted to protect her. That's easy to explain
Yeah,
because
and
that
I
is what a man is supposed to do without with or without the initiation from the woman. That's what men do. That's what they did in my family growing up. Men protected us. And
Yeah,
it may take for me to say, "Hey, that shit offended me." Because sometimes men don't know what's offensive to a woman versus what's not offensive to a woman. A man can't just read your mind to know if that's going to offend you today or tomorrow. One day something might be funny. The next day it may hit different and it might not be that funny. So like that's easy to explain because those are the values that I would want my son to learn. I told my son, that's what you were supposed to do, son. You knocked the shit out of somebody about your sister.
well,
and
I,
the different reactions that I'm seeing and hearing uh, is what I expect people's behavior to be. It
Mhm.
will vary depending on how you're looking at the situation and where you're coming from, etc., etc. But I mean, people are really going to me really went to are
An extreme.
perpetuating it because
Mhm.
the way they are reacting to it. Uh,
well,
and Will's going to continue to make money. And to me, uh, here again, behavior there has in terms of the industry, they could not do anything because as
But
a
it's
society we've set certain
I,
things that are
I
people's
disagree
behavior
with
and the
them.
salt, this and that, whatever. Yeah,
He
go
has
ahead.
been a stellar person. He has never shown any signs of anything. And you know what I think about every time, like all day to day, thinking of up to this conversation is Jay Z's. I'm not black. I'm OJ.
but
Yeah.
but
And
Okay.
see,
and I
Because
and I
that
but
and
don't mean nothing.
I'm gonna take this back. Maybe again, I got 7 sisters. My sister didn't have to look at me. If I thought that somebody said something out of pocket, I would and handle it. It
But
didn't
when
take
you
a
use
look.
the laughing
She
stuff
she
off,
she
though,
did. Uh,
he made his whole image around
well,
being a
hey,
good, nice guy, a meek guy, somebody that if you joke around with, he ain't gonna say. He has built his. So even if that is who he is up under, if he was really a rowdy up under, he has built his whole career to make white people accept him for being this nice, goofy guy because they only really fuck with goofy guys. That's nice guys. They don't fuck with the tough black dudes like that. They don't when you get a real strong black man, in order to be successful in this industry, most times you got to dress like a woman at some point. You got to be soft. You got to be jelly back. You got to let them basically run a train on you with the numbers that they be trying to give you. They give you all the messed up deals until you make so much money to where now we'll let you get in for, you know what I'm saying, a little bit more than what everybody else getting into. But it takes so much of that brow beating, they beat you over the head, all that hazing type of behavior in order for a black man to really become successful in the industry. And the one time he has some type of about himself, now they want to end his fucking career. That's some bullshit.
one of the things that did happen that I thought was positive was that as this happened, and afterward, other people came step forward to go to each party that was involved and dealt with the situation, whether they tried to de-escalate it or give comfort or whatever to all parties involved. I was glad to see that happen versus just sitting back and waiting for somebody else to do it. Somebody step forward. Uh, uh, Various people, as I looked at and heard other people talk, which was a positive thing to me in terms of people in the artists that say they care about you as friends and whatever. You show your behavior at that point showed that you cared about both parties, etc., and step forward. You did that out of respect, out of emotion, out of trying to de-escalate whatever. I'm glad that people did that. One I've even seen little on YouTube where they even had people analyzing the behavior of the audience. It's gone to me. It's gone to that extreme behaviors that have actually looked at people's behavior when things happen. They've done that, and then I saw one little clip of that said that Chris Rock, I think, has a number of brothers, 5 brothers, and one of the brothers was on stage and stuff and said to somebody. First, a third party said that Chris Rock had brothers, and what Will Smith's behavior didn't. It was so quick he didn't think about that. The other family members that were
Well,
there could have come on Will and took up for their
Yeah,
brother, etc., etc.
it
And
could
so
it,
it's all over the place.
yeah
I mean,
it
that's
could have.
entertainment in itself. All the
Right.
various
I
things.
mean, it could have got real nasty, but I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
thank God, it didn't go any
yeah,
further than what it
yeah,
did. And like I said, I think the main thing that we learned out of the whole situation is that Chris Rock has a hell of a chin, and maybe he should think about taking up boxing. But
yeah, that
Ms. Sims, we had started an earlier discussion about this Florida bill, this gay bill thing. And as one of the reasons why I thought about it is because Dr. Casey had brought it up in her closing remarks last week. But when I look back upon my sex education, and I'm not saying that I'm indicative of everyone, but most education didn't come from our parents. It came from either our peers in school, you know, and usually when you know our parents were the birds and bees generation. They didn't really tell you about the spermazoa and all that.
yeah,
It was a very kind of a bland type of thing. Where do babies come from? Well,
uh,
the
uh,
stork brings them, and you had cartoons about it the whole 9 yards. What do you think? Where do you think that children today get their primary sex education from? And the reason why I'm asking that is because I don't really think that there are any schools that actually teach education to kindergarten kids.
I don't. Me personally, uh, nobody has given me that sex education talk yet. To this very, I was quiet. I was the seventh of 9 children. I had 7 brothers, 1 sister, and my parents didn't talk about all the things. If I found out something, it was overhearing somebody's loud voices or something. Um, in terms of education to nowadays, I think because society has left so many things to somebody else and put it out there, not knowing how to do it or wanted to do it, they get their sex education from a variety of places. I don't here as I remember as my children were growing up, there were certain things that were restricted in terms of what they put under sex education mode, And I think at one point, if there was something to be taught about, it was through the physical education classes or health classes or something like that. But it was a very minimum, and it didn't go into any the details, actual everyday living type thing that we as a society do. The only thing in looking back, if I was thinking about body functions, etc., I got it out of my science classes in terms of the functions of the body. But do you want to give me a sex education? No, James, I take it back. I was going to ask you. You want? I
But
take it back. I take it back.
I'm a
I take it
certified
back.
sex educator. You know I'm a certified sex
I noticed that
educator,
on your website, etc.,
Miss
etc. And
Sims.
someone that intentionally or goes takes that on and goes into that arena, uh, they don't know what they're talking about in regards because people, say people that are in your position, Dr. Casey, that listens to your broadcast and stuff, they build up a kind of a trust in continue to listen to you, and especially if they're going through various negative things, experiences in their life and whatever, and your broadcast maybe be touching on that day, and they look at you and they build some sort of trust, and they think some of the things that you're saying, they think about it in a different light, and so that's how trust is built up, and that's why I say if people, whomever you may be, venture into that, I hope they actually know what they're talking about, because when people venture into things like that, they're usually in pain and suffering from something, and they need mental, emotional, sometimes physical help or whatever. So that's one way how I say that we all interacted, related to each other at some level, and a lot of people don't think think
but
that through in terms of that.
but Miss Sims, at one time, and I want to say this was during the '80s, maybe the '90s,
Hmm.
when they started teaching sex education in schools. We almost had riots. How dare you teach my kids about how actually babies are actually made? I still want you to think that when you see them in the hospital, behind that screen, that pane of glass,
And I just
that's it. Babies come out all clean and everything. I mean, you don't realize.
yeah, and so to me, a baby's coming out and being born. To me, that isn't what we normally think of as sex education. That's just a process of being born. But I think maybe one of the reasons I just thought of this, James, as you're talking, one of the reasons why there was so much uh, uproar or flack about sex education in the general sense, because people were fearful that maybe someone was going to teach their children something that you were doing, that they were doing, that they didn't want it out there for
Probably the
yeah,
gay and
and they
homosexual stuff too.
and yeah, and they didn't couldn't trust what that other person had learned and was going to teach and things like that. So I think there was maybe a personal fear in regards to what was going to be taught to their children, how the children was going to respond, were the children going to try what they heard, etc., etc. And so I think that played into all the controversy and the uproar and things like that. I mean, you got to remember that teachers are out there, but they're also individuals in terms of just like us,
Well,
regular
teachers
people.
are us. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah.
uh, so, Dr. Casey, why is it so much easier to, well, for this to be accepted among your generation, but yet, when you talk about it to people of, well, our generation, meaning me and Miss Sims, it's still that, this is something that, we want you to teach, but we don't want to necessarily know that you're teaching it.
I think that there is a misconception and the thought that people of my generation are okay with it. I think that you have a large portion of white America that kind of pushes a lot of things. And then that turns into the LGBTQ community. I don't know all the letters, so please don't get mad. But it transcends into that, and then it's so crazy because it's weird that um you talk about it's a lot of gay rights things going on, but the minute that you talk about being straight, it's like a problem. Like people get offended by you saying that I'm straight. You know what I'm saying? And it's weird because again, especially when you think about the music industry and stuff, it is crazy because I feel like I'm pressured a lot to or that people in general, not just me, are pressured into doing things that are questionable in order to be accepted in the music industry. Like they want to have a one up or over you or something to hang over your head so that if you get out of line, they can have something to say. But it's not really accepted as much as I think that it is being pushed. Um, Black people are weird about sex talks and stuff like that. So I don't think that we are really okay with it. But if you put a spin on it, like the "Don't Say Gay" bill, when it actually don't say nothing about saying gay, it makes it appealing. So a lot of what the media does is like PR. They do whatever they can to draw the attention to whatever narrative they're trying to paint it to be, regardless if that's the truth behind it.
But Dr. Casey, look, okay, I'm gonna go kind of deep back in it.
Oh, he's getting ready to step into it. Go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
I'm gonna put an F on my freakiness. Uh, Masters and Johnson
Mhm.
came out with surveys and sex different techniques and sessions long before we start accepting some of these uh, other venues. Threesomes, wife swapping, all of this ain't nothing new. This stuff didn't come out in 2000. I mean, I knew about this stuff back in the 70s, back in, uh,
But for black people, it was, like, forbidden, though. You gotta think how heavy
it
the
was
black
for
people
it
were.
was for him it was forbidden for him to talk about it. You ain't gonna tell. Hey,
I don't know if they was doing it, but you gotta think about how heavy church was, especially then and still now in the black community, to make people feel like if you do anything outside of this box of what we say is allowed, then you going to hell. And so many people are afraid to go to hell that they live inside a box. So they don't know that it's a whole world that exists outside of what they've been told to believe.
And I think there was a certain segment of the population in terms of sex actually thought and felt it was a private thing, a very private thing. A lot of them, nobody talked to them about it. Things that they did in the bedroom among themselves, it was probably they wouldn't want to let other people know what they were doing. While at the same time, the other people were doing the same thing. So uh, they, I think, the general mode of operating was we don't talk about it. People were doing it, like Dr. Casey said. People, James and I knew that people were doing it and things were going on. Things that were a sexual life, a healthy sexual life was going on. Uh, sex, people were fear. If I think one of the reasons also that in terms of people were afraid of the sex talk, it, we also know that it led to having children out of wedlock and things like that. We knew that the children having babies having babies, that was unhealthy physically. I think their bodies may not have been ready at 12 and 13 years old, but you know, uh, so maybe the youngsters that were doing that, maybe when they went into labor and stuff, it was harder just on the maturity of their systems and stuff. And then uh, teenagers, whatever, having babies, who's going to take care of these children, things like that. So there's a lot of things that were attached to that, healthy and unhealthy discussions that were going on. And so you have people like Dr. Casey probably looked at it, read about it, studied it, whatever, and tried to pull out some things to uh, comfort or explain to people what were going on, the things that were ugly, things that were maybe happening within a family in regards to uh, parents of sexually abusing their children. So a lot of things related to sex, good, the bad, and the ugly, were taking place. It wasn't talked about or put it out there, even in terms of when family members were doing negative things to each other that was cited. And then slowly, even before Dr. Casey was born, somebody, and I don't know how, started to talking about it. Maybe there were big celebrities doing things and it got to be legal, so therefore it got more and more things got put out in the public arena, and so people started talking about, and that meant that people like Dr. Casey that cared about people what they were going through and saw that there needs to be something there to talk about it, to mitigate some of the negative things that were going on, or talk about the positive things. The whole industry came up, I think, out of that. There was a need. There was a need for that in regards to once it became public and people were willing to talk about it openly and things like that. We were willing to go to groups and to talk about things that were happening to them, negative things in their families. They were being abused or raped, even family members, etc., etc. So it got to the point where we could not discuss it anymore.
Do you think that that was what happened, Dr. Casey? It got to the point where we could not afford not to talk about it anymore?
I think that that's where we're at currently, but again, when you're dealing with how strong the stronghold of religion to where people can actually be educated on the reality of what sex is and everything surrounding it. Because again, the minute, what did I say, James? Every time it comes to sex, people are like, oh, wait, I can't look at it, I can't see it, I can't talk. But in the back of their mind, they're peeking. They want to know. They trying to see, but
Sex magazines were still being sold and bought.
and a lot of kids found those sex magazines,
Yeah,
especially
yeah,
even in strict households.
yeah, yeah.
So people are still trying to see, look, hear, and be a part of sexuality education. However, it is so frowned upon. As soon as you say anything about anything, it's like you're a pervert, and it's crazy because people, the things that we call sexual harassment now were like regular things back
Oh
when I
my
was
God.
younger. Like, like in the military, like jokes, like all type of stuff. Even
Oh
when I was in church, I know at least two people that in my old church that pawned my ass, and you just kind of
man.
like,
you,
Uh,
you, you,
but
you,
but
done-
she talk
you,
you when
you
she
just sent
mentioned
Miss Sims into her friend Sanford
no, but
impression here.
as she was talking about, she mentioned the religious component of that, and there was, because as we were growing up, where we were taught that no sex until you're married. Uh, Virginity was valued in
It was
things
overrated, Miss Sims.
things like that. Once the covers we started talking about it, we found out like what's going on. And then also when you had a wedding, the your white gown signified your virginity, your chastity, your virtue and things like that. Nowadays, to me, as I watch some of these wedding gown style shows, people put more emphasis on the gown than the relationship. And I wonder,
Yeah.
do these people, how they relate to each other? They'll spend
Listen, Miss Sims,
thousands of dollars on the dress, on the dress, on the dress, and I'm thinking,
a
what,
lot of times, Miss
yeah,
Sims, these
yeah,
people don't care about the actual
yeah,
relationship. It's
yeah,
the benefits that come from the relationship. I've watched so many people look, even I, well, when I got married because I thought that me and this person loved each other. And I
yeah,
thought that we were building and growing together. But a lot of times people are not going into it for that. They're looking for help. They found somebody that helps them stabilize their lives, and now they go ahead and get married, and then the wedding is
yeah,
50, 60, 70,000, and they be divorced in 3 years because they didn't put that 60,
pretty
$70,000
much, yeah,
into working
yeah,
on their
yeah, yeah.
relationship as much.
Yeah, and so yeah, how people relate to each other and people's behavior uh, seem the emphasis on thinking about that, how people relate to each other, seem not to be up in the forefront like it should have been in terms of uh, living longer and happier married lives or bringing our families and things like that. Uh, because people do some good, bad, and ugly things, and that's out there, and we need to deal with it. And if it gets too out of balance, whatever, then it starts to get out in the public arena, and we can't not do something
Mhm.
or discuss it or try to deal with it or find some sort of way to deal with it. And usually, everything in life that I know about has at least two sides to everything in it. And when something gets out of balance, you got a problem. No matter what it is, something gets out of balance, there's problems.
Um, I'm going to kind of move this for a minute because I know Brother Williams and Honeybee's coming in tonight, but I want to just kind of skim through this right quick because we have three states that want to stop the Biden administration from rescinding Title 42, citing a massive influx of immigration from the South. Title 42 basically says that you can send any immigrant back uh, across the border uh, for you don't have to have a specific reason. It can be as vague as uh, not not being able to get in touch with your relatives. Maybe your relatives have moved, things like that. Uh, and as I mentioned last week, we still have a mass influx of Haitians waiting to come across the border. We still have people escaping gang violence in Costa Rica, and other places uh, in the South. But while we want to restrict this immigration, we have 150,000 Ukrainians that are waiting to come to the United States. Miss Sims,
Yes.
I understand that there are a lot of suffering and that this is a war torn country, but hasn't there been a war on black people for the last 400 years?
Battles every day in regards to constantly, and it's how people choose to admit it, recognize it. Battles are battles. I think daily battles are shown. I think maybe why a lot of people don't recognize it or don't want to recognize it, yeah, because our day to day lives for Black folk, battles are take different ways of coming across. Sometimes a battle is real overt and you can tell it, like somebody calling you the N word or racist or whatever. That's right out there for everybody to see and deal with. but then there are battles, silent battles that go on. You peel back the layers, that there are things going on that we don't think about what's going on. There are battles going on, political battles. There are battles that go on within our jobs and stuff. I can remember when I was um, got out of college and went into my first job, and it was with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And at that time, during that time, it was coming about where one of the laws was that you are no longer on your applications. You could not ask if a person was black or white, which culture, whatever, and that was illegal to do. So that battle, so people agreed to that, whatever, but the battle still raved on. The battle took a different face. The battle took a different, came across in a different way. People start asking, what color are your eyes? What color is your hair? Because there was a generalization that the white culture had blue eyes, blonde hair, etc., etc. So you got the information in a different way. That battle of class of the battle of on being in writing, you had to put down in writing what race you were, etc., etc., so people could visually see it and read it. That battle didn't go away. It just kind of went underground in a little bit. So we were still in that battle, but some people may have thought it went away because the words weren't on a document. But if you stop and thought about it, and people that were in the industry that were doing the hiring and firing black folk, here again you see something, you say something, and it came to surface like that. But I remember that during those times. I was in my early 20s or so and things like that. So yeah, uh, we're in a battle, just daily battles, and there are different kinds of battles that we fight constantly. Whether it's the landlord battle, uh, battles against each other, you in all cultures and communities, people, they have battles with each other. Then they have battles outside of their cultures, etc., etc. People's behaviors haven't stopped, and things are going to go on. I think you just have to be to real astute to realize that a lot of the battles that we thought that we fought and passed laws against, etc., and on the books didn't go away. They're still there. They've taken another form. They've taken another color, and they maybe got spread out a little bit, but they're still there because there are people in the system that are perpetuating it and keep doing it and bring it forth generation after generation. And here again, I just said earlier to keep your eye on the prize, and people get when instances like the Academy Oscar things come up, people's eyes get taken from the real prize, and their attention gets averted. But the people who are continuing to perpetuate our battles, they they don't forget about it. They're still doing their dirty work, etc., etc.
Uh, Dr. Casey, what's your thoughts on that?
Uh, I really don't have any thoughts on that because honestly and truly, when it comes to each area that we're discussing, it's kind of like subjective and a luck of the draw because each person is going to have their own perspective on what is considered right, wrong, or indifferent. So, um, I mean, people are going to be people, and it's going to be a matter of are we going to embrace people for who and what and where they are, or are we going to continue to try to put people where we think that they should be?
I want to welcome Brother Robert and Humblebee to tonight's show. How are you both doing?
Doing well. Doing well.
Um,
I'm doing well.
we we got into a kind of heated discussion a little earlier, and I'm going to bring it back to.
Wasn't he?
I'm going to talk about
Hate on issue.
sexuality, um,
Okay.
and I brought it up in the context of Dr. Casey's closing remarks last week, and uh, the so-called gay learning in Florida. And my initial question was, where do we get our initial sex education? Do we get it from our peers? Do we get it in school? Do we get it from our parents? Because I can remember back in my day, the stork brought babies. You know, the birds and the bees. We learned about it like that. You didn't. There was physical contact was something that was at a minimum. And as we progressed, now, at one time, even teaching sexual education in schools was a no-no. Now, first of all, where do you think that we get most of our sexual education? And number two, do you really think that how did I phrase this? I want to make sure I phrase this right. Uh, who do you think? First of all, like I said, where do you think we get most of our sexual education from initially? And do you know of any location where this is actually taught, or is this a preemptive strike?
I'm gonna be. You want to take it first?
Absolutely. Um, so when it comes to me myself, when I took when I took sexual education in school, we didn't learn about actual sex. We learned about how the body develops and everything like that. I grew up in a predominant well, I can't even say predominantly. I grew up in a straight household. I didn't know any gay or lesbian people. It was not taught in schools. Um, we basically just learned about how boys go through their hormones, girls go through theirs, and that's about it. I feel like this whole situation where they're making it, we're teaching gay sex or whatever the situation is, whatever they think is being taught in schools. That's not what it is. I have nieces and nephews that are in schools. I've asked them what did they learn. It's pretty much the same thing I learned.
Mhm.
So I'm not understanding where this information is coming from, where people think that it's, a class that you're learning about homosexuality or whatever it is. I just feel like there are people out there who think that there's this thing called a gay agenda. And I don't think that's a thing at all. I grew up with all straight people around me. I never saw a gay person a day in my life until I was an adult, which had me confused as to why is it that, you know, all of my friends like boys and I think my friends are cute. What's wrong with me? So you cannot say that you're influenced to become gay. You're not, I mean, sometimes there are situations where people are like, are put in a situation where they start to question their sexuality because of what happened to them as a child. But I can say also from that, I was the first when I know for a fact when I was in elementary school, I want to say maybe the first grade, second, it's one of those something like that where you go to school and you start to look at the boys and the girls start to look at the or sorry, the boys start to look at the girls and the girls start to look at the boys. that wasn't hitting. That never hit me. And I was the weird kid because all the girls were talking about the boys that they liked, and I couldn't talk about who I liked. And it was never a discussion of, well, maybe you might like the same sex. So that's where I'm trying to understand, if when you're in school, everything that you see is heterosexual. All the lessons that you're taught are heterosexual. They're teaching you how to not get pregnant. They're teaching you how to protect yourself from STDs, which it happens in both ends, whether you're straight, gay. Um, I just don't understand where people are getting this notion that you're taught it.
Mr. King humbly just said what I was gonna uh, say in regards to, especially during our time when it first came out, the word sex education. There's different aspects because in the beginning, when people talked about, you have to think about, are you, when you say sex education, is not the same thing as, the biology of learning your bodily functions, how the body functions hormonally, your periods, the uh, male genital, things like that. To me, that's learning the biology and having babies. That's a process of that's one part that people want to call as sex education, but to me that's learning how you are, how you came to be. And I think during the years sex education went in deeper and deeper as people were more willing to talk about sex education, and the other various aspects to sex education came into the mix in regards to gay and straight and things like that. And those, so to me, those are two entirely different topics of conversation under the same title. And you have to to me, you when you talk sex education, you have to distinguish, especially if you're going to teach it in school and stuff, between the two. So whoever you're teaching it to will learn the difference between the two, what you're talking about.
Here's my thing with that. So, I learned, of course, sexual education. In the 6th grade, mind you, at that point, I already had my first girl crush, who I was, obviously I'm in the 6th grade. It doesn't really matter, but I was dating that person. But it's not the same as when you're an adult.
Right.
And we were put in a sexual education class after school, and they put all the boys on one side, all the girls on one side, and they would make us take a doll home that would imitate having an actual child. You had to wake up in the middle of the night because the doll would cry and everything like that. And you were graded on how well you communicated with the boy partner that you were paired with. So, in my opinion, if I did that whole project and I did well, why didn't that influence me to be straight?
I think that sometimes being exposed to any sexual content, whether it is homosexual content or anything like that, it does influence what you like or what you're drawn to. Because sometimes even heterosexual content can be distributed too early, and it can either turn a person on or off as even a child towards one thing or another. Because just think about growing up, we're all like, ew, boys, the cooties and all those type of things. So all of those things kind of play into it. Me and James was talking earlier. I wish I could see everybody. But me and James was talking earlier about just sex and how when we were growing up, it was like one of those don't ask, don't tell. Like you can't really say it, or you can't really do this, or it was like one of those forbidden type of things. So it is not really um being exposed to one thing or another, because I remember, I think I remember going to a cousin's house for a sleepover, and the little girls was in there playing with each other coochies. So it is different variations of where it starts and how people are introduced to any type of sexual nature. Like I said, me and James talking about hearing older cousins or parents or aunts having sex in other rooms. So all of those things can either turn you away from. I don't think that you can really teach a person to be anything. However, I definitely think that some people can be encouraged into certain stuff, like when you see parents cheering on certain type of behavior or things like that. I think that that can encourage a person to be more one way or another. But at the end of the day, I think it's most important to allow children to develop and determine what they desire for themselves, and support that as they grow.
Let
Humbly,
me
I would answer your question. I'm sorry. I'll just be real brief. I would answer your question that with the uh, doll project and you all taking home, etc., etc. To me, you were being taught the biology and the procreation of sex education in regards to how families function and you take care of babies, etc., etc. It didn't go into the deeper level that you were at, that you were looking for answers. I
let
just
me
Brother,
jump in real quick and
So I'm more like
just give y'all my
scared
experience and
straight.
my. Can y'all hear me?
mm,
Okay. Okay. My experience and my situation. First, kind of like what Humblebee started out with. I remember taking sex education as far as the school system goes. It was either in the fifth grade or sixth grade, and I remember having to bring home a note and getting my parents to sign it to prove that I could take the class, and like Ms. Sims was saying, it was basically covering the biology aspect of reproduction. Now, what I recall remembering about that and how it influenced me is that the way it was introduced to me and the way I took it was that it was justifying and giving you a basic uh, understanding of why sex happens. And from that standpoint, by introducing it from a biological standpoint, and the way it was covered is that basically it takes a male and a female in order to reproduce. And this is the different stages. The development of the fetus is what they talked about childbirth, and then going into that, it at that age, being in the fifth and sixth grade, it gave me a understanding of, oh, okay, so this is really how things happen. But let me also go into how I was initially introduced into to sex. And I think I mentioned this before on the show. And the age of between ages of 5 and 7, I was actually molested by a grown man, and that was my introduction into sex. But at the same time, when that happened to me between those ages, I actually did not connect the dots between
yeah,
the acts that was taking place with me
right, right.
and what happens when what it takes to make a child.
hmm
What happened to me also about it, I think it was when I was 6 and a half, close to 7 years old. My father had to sit down and go over, explain to me about childbirth simply because, and it may just be in the neighborhood I grew up in, probably a rough neighborhood. From that standpoint, I remember seeing this 11-year-old child with a big stomach, and I remember it just vividly to this day. And I thought, she was gonna pop. So I ran in the house and told my dad, "Hey, can you come out here and look at this? Something's really wrong with this girl's stomach. I don't understand why her stomach is like that." I've never seen that since then either. A 11-year-old child pregnant, and she was probably in her last trimester of being pregnant. And when my dad explained to me that she was pregnant, I had no idea how to take that. I had
Right,
no idea
right.
that a child could even get pregnant, yet alone I really didn't understand what that was. And then the fact that I saw it in an 11-year-old, I didn't even know where to go with that because I'm thinking all kinds of stuff went through my head at that point because it was just completely mind blowing that that could happen to somebody that young.
Mhm.
And then I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, how, who, and all kinds of stuff went through my head. So at that point, my father had to explain to me what what sexual relationships are, and that's how I got introduced to that concept. But now going back to my experiences doing child molestation, like Dr. Casey said, that impacted me, and I would say up until this day, in terms of how I viewed sex, how I viewed relationships, and also I believe it has definitely. I do know when you introduce a child to sex at that young of an age,
Mhm.
it will completely influence their outlook on what they find to be attractive.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
struggled with recognizing myself as a heterosexual through my teen years, and it wasn't until around 14 that I recognized that I'm not gay, nor did I have sex with anybody prior to that. But because of my exposure, I was
Mhm.
confused as to what I wanted in a relationship in terms of attractiveness between male and female.
Mhm.
And I do know that played a significant influence, as well as dealing with it from a psychological aspect. What it also caused me to do in my older adult years, I'm saying younger adult years, is psychologically it caused me to want to prove that I was heterosexual, which caused me to be way more sexually active than I should have been.
Mhm.
And that reflected back on how I was exposed to sex at a young age. And then the last thing I do want to clear up is that there is definitely a concept in terms of gay agenda. And I've read documentation, I've seen studies on it, and it, for the most part, has to do with population control, and it also has to do with wealth. It's weird as it may sound, because the levels I was involved in with the music industry, I got a chance to see to some small degree, because I wasn't nowhere heavy in the game, how the music industry is heavily influenced
Mhm.
through gay male agenda, as well as when I lived in Atlanta, I got a chance to see that from a political standpoint, in regards to just a lot of the attorneys and politicians were actually closet gays, and it there was this literal bond that they had in terms of consolidating power and wealth. And so
Mhm.
when we say gay agenda, it's like, I don't know if it's really, if agenda is the right word, but it was like a specific bracket or club or group that operated a certain way, and they
That's
pushed a certain type of mentality out to the public. And so from that perspective, I do know that there is one to a certain degree. I can't talk about or give you any insight as to the motive outside of just acquiring more people to be on that fashion.
That's what I was
Now,
telling James earlier. As far as in the music industry, it seems almost as a rites of passage to
Yep.
do homosexual activities, because it's like they want to one up on you, and in order to get to those higher level rankings, um that is, it seems, I could be wrong, I'm not saying that everybody that get to a certain level that has some type of experience, but I would say probably 98% of them have, because in order to go up, you got to do a little bit a little bit of strange things to get a little bit of change.
well,
And it's
well,
crazy
now,
because you feel pressured to do it.
it's strange that you mentioned that, because I thought that that was one of the requirements in order for you to be music director at the church. Hey, I mean, that's just the way that's the way it was
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's just
in church, and
flamboyant.
right, and so I thought, okay, well, like I said earlier, Dr. Casey, there were certain occupations or things that that you were kind of directed toward, That was one of them. I thought, hey, if
I
you have
think
a
just
gay,
maybe because it's accepted, that way you can kind of be more expressive of yourself. I don't know as a choir director, but I can see where you're saying that it seems as though those are the people that they were put in that position. But when you talk about a gay agenda, it's not like Mr. Williams said, it's not I don't know if agenda is the correct wording, but there is definitely a kind of a push to do some things that were not as common to be seen at some point because there was a time where again you could not even talk about it. Wasn't that you couldn't talk about it, you just didn't talk about it. Like it was like
well,
uh
there was a time that if you went to jail, you automatically thought that every gay person in jail wanted to turn you out. And they didn't give a damn about you. If they saw somebody soft, maybe that was another whole conversation. But that wasn't their agenda. But things get distorted when you get enclosed societies and enclosed type of environments like that. But
That's where church and stuff come in. All that religion makes you feel like if anything is outside of what religion has told you is acceptable, it has to be an agenda to turn people versus just allowing people to see that other things actually exist. And I think that that's what it needs to happen. But I think it should be done age appropriately because definitely there is a blinder. Again, I will keep doing this the whole show. There's a blinder that exists where church people is like, hold on, I see, I'm
Yeah,
looking.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And until you actually address that and make it a conversation, it's going to always seem like there is some type of sexual agenda. But David was a hoe. Jesus was talking to the hoes. Samuel, he had hoes. Everybody in the Bible had a whole bunch of women, but now it's a problem when anybody got more than one person. Even the women had women. That's what the concubines were. The concubines was not for the men. It's like a lady in waiting. A lot of things that you see in the UK and their structure of hierarchy, that's how things were, and those are some of the only societies that still hold on to that structure. And now um we see things like that as, oh my God, something has to be wrong with it. But that's the way things been the whole time.
I think it's like the three of us were discussing before Mr. Williams and Humbly came on in regards to my generation and whatever. I said, I'm still waiting for the sex education talk. And today I'm 73 years old and I haven't had it yet. And during our generation, that was one of the things that you talked about. But like Dr. Casey said, it was there and it showed, people were doing it and people that were aware of it, they knew who the people were, like in the church musicians and extra and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I thought about as Mr. Williams was talking about how the education system itself has changed, because I graduated in 1967 from high school. During the senior year, which was almost a scandal, there was a senior that was married, and she was married to a college student. I just kind of found this out later. I was a loner and I was an introvert, and so when I wanted to find stuff out, I went and read about it, et cetera, et cetera. But the school staff, she wasn't this, and then she became pregnant. And that's how I kind of found out about it. She was not allowed to sit with the regular students. The staff, you know, quarantined her. So like we could catch pregnancy from her. They quarantined her in regards to the contact she had with the other student population. So, it was she wasn't she was allowed, and I think maybe because she was married, she was allowed to continue school. She was a young white lady, maybe because of her culture. But I mean, they treated her with kid gloves. They kept her separated, etc., and wouldn't talk about it. And when she
I
became
think that's
pregnant, I
what
guess other students saw it, whatever. But just I thought of how the school system changed through the years in regard to that particular young lady and her experiences, and through the years how sex education, when it came about, when they did start talking about it, only the um, the staff that taught the health classes, or maybe the health classes staff were the ones that, and you had it like Mr. Williams was saying. I heard that you had to sign a paper for your student, for your child to even take those courses. And so all of that, as I'm hearing people talk, especially the younger folks, in regards to their experiences and stuff, it brings back a lot of memories.
so
I
when people were in alternative schools, that was when people were pregnant and stuff, that they would send people to those
Yeah,
alternative schools for
Yep,
that
I
reason,
remember
right?
that. I
yeah.
remember that in junior high, finding out about this one child that got transferred, and every all of the students would just talk about it. 'Cause so the teachers didn't tell you, but you found out because everybody was talking about her, and that's exactly what happened. They kicked her out and put her in alternative school, and that kind of just goes back to even what I'm saying about the experience I had with this 11-year-old,
Mhm.
seeing this 11-year-old pregnant. They didn't want to expose the other children to this type of thing happening because it would, you know, make all kinds of things go through their mind in terms of sexual behavior.
That
Now,
was. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll
I was
fit.
just going to say, just going back to I think the initial aspect of this being introduced to younger children, it's like what we are saying, third grade and stuff like that, or second. I don't see that. That doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yep, children. Look, children aren't little adults, like I said before, and a memory came to mind also when my son and daughter went to high school, especially when my son in the early '70s he was in high school. This particular school where I live is North High School. They did have a program where uh, females that were pregnant were allowed to come to school. They built a program around that so that the young ladies would not miss out on education. So they came to school pregnant. They even had a daycare in the school for their children. Uh, to come to while they went to classes, and then I think eventually they had classes that involved the young men that were involved in the pregnancy. So that was unique in on the north side. I don't think all high schools had that, but at this particular school, it was considered advanced in regards to what was going on. And they did have a program for the young ladies to continue when they were pregnant and when they had the baby. They had a daycare at the school, and then eventually they brought in the young men. So that was, you guys bring back a lot of memories.
So here's my thing. Sexual education is to teach youth about the things that they need to prevent, because obviously, whether we shelter our kids or not, they're going to hang out with their friends. They're going to learn about sex and they're going to want to be curious about it. So why can't sexual education just be strictly about these are the STDs, these are STIs, these are the things that you can catch by having sex, and not put gender into it. You can get pregnant if you have a male
At
and a
what
female.
age though? At what age?
That's what we need to figure out. We need to figure out what age do we start this and talk about the things that can and cannot happen, because a lot of the transmitted diseases, it doesn't matter whether you're straight, gay, it's
Facts.
sexually transmitted. So stop adding, okay, it's a male or female, female, male.
See,
If
a
you
lot
have
of times I don't think that people realize how sex happens when it is same sex intercourse. So they don't like this is where the Christian denial and all of that plays into it. Because if you don't realize how people are able to have sex, then you're not thinking that they're actually having sex. You're just thinking um, of other things other than actual sex. Because people only think that sex happens between a male part and a female part. They don't think about tribing and all of the other things that happens.
That's when they
Um,
need to. That's when they need to start
Yep.
incorporating, or just, keep it to a certain age range. Before then, it is the parents'
it's
responsibility.
adults that don't know that shit, girl.
It's the parents'
You, you,
responsibility to
you
protect their
just heard
children.
you just heard Miss Sims say she's
Miss
never got to
Wilson
talk.
do it.
Miss Sims still hasn't got to talk.
That's right. That's right. And we're talking
Well,
about how young children. I think children within a family, toddlers or before they go to preschool or elementary school, they see the difference in our bodies. If they're a girl and male and female, they notice the difference. But how you answer their questions is important. They just might. I mean, you could say, maybe answer their question in one sentence, and they'll be happy. You answer their question, so they'll go on. They are not ready for a college course on all the physiologies and the all this and that. They just want a simple question answered. Then now, once they're satisfied, they'll go on. But it's when you're in the home, children do notice the difference in how we answer those questions in a
now,
healthy manner. I mean, that helps the child. You know, I think with their understanding of sex and our bodies and whatever, as they grow up and things like that.
and
Uh,
I think what Humblebee is actually getting at is something we got to recognize between us generations. When especially you Sims versus Casey and myself, the deal is during your time there was no internet. There was no
Yeah,
cell phones. There was no access
that's
to
right.
pornography. All right. When I was a child, there was no access to pornography. This generation now can accidentally click the wrong button on every one of their smartphones and be introduced to pornography. And
Yep.
so I think as a result of the current situation as it applies to children's exposure, this is just my thought process as to why they're attempting to lower the age at which they have this discussion of children. Whereas when I went to school, the idea at that point in time was you're introducing the children to sex education when their bodies naturally start developing an inquisitiveness about what's going on. So they teach it from a biological standpoint
Mm.
because they want you to know what's happening to your body, and they want you to know the natural course of how reproduction happens. And I mean, we can't take away, however, I do got to say this, we can't take away the concept when you say sex education and they're teaching it from a biological standpoint, that reproduction actually means to replicate. Replicate, it takes a male and a female to replicate. So if they're teaching sex education from the standpoint of letting you know what's going on with your hormones on as it applies to that, then they're going to get into the aspect of
Yep.
male and female. That's just the
Yep.
bottom line. And then kind of going back to what Sims is saying, as well as just our experiences as it applies to attractiveness. You may even go to what I experienced. The deal is actual relationships between male, female, or male, female is totally different than the sex education as it applies to the natural biological hormonal things that take place when it applies to reproduction. So it's the whole introduction of where they're trying to go with it now, I think has more so to do with people getting exposed to sexual behavior,
Yeah.
not sex education, but
Right.
from a
Right.
sexual behavior perspective. So now you got to kind of introduce the children to the idea now of sexual behavior, which at that point
Right.
can get into regardless of whether it's male and female. It's just two people engaging regardless of the gender, because of the exposure now. So children now are being exposed way sooner, and not only way sooner, to more lewd and open acts than what we ever had access to. You can click the wrong button and get all
Yeah,
kinds of weird
yeah.
stuff. And
It,
so from that standpoint, I think the education now, it has to do with that, as well as we got to recognize this, just as it applies to media, things are just changing.
yeah,
Back in the day, you didn't have television where they would have two men kissing or two women kissing, whereas now, even PG-13 or G movies, you're gonna have that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you got to explain at a younger age, kind of sort of what's going on,
yeah.
and
It's
I think that's
interesting.
where
Yeah,
things are headed.
it's interesting that you brought in the internet because that even happens to me. Certain apps that I will download, and the internet people have figured out how to attach stuff in the background to certain
Hmm.
things. Because I'll download an app, and all of a sudden I see naked people and social
I
clubs,
think Miss Sims over there googling
And
because
I said,
she
and I
wants
said,
to know.
I said to my daughter, I said, Kathy, well, how did this get? My daughter's about 44. How did this get on my phone? And she said, Mom, they have a way to attach and stuff, money, making money, etc., etc. I said, well, just show me how to get it off, whatever. But you're right. Wall Street is into that, into the different, as Mr. Williams was saying and Humbly B are explaining. Once you get Wall Street into anything, hey, it takes a life of its own and goes in a totally different direction than what's positive or healthy or positive for the general population of people. No matter whether they're gay or straight or whatever. Wall Street to turn things around. They'll do whatever they need to do to make the money.
Dr. Casey, how have you seen the evolution of your uh, Speaking Freedom TV and your different projects in the sense of the amount of interest when you first started and the amount of interest that you garner now at the present time?
For me, it's kind of hard to measure because I was low key for so long. But in the last I've been doing this since
It's you
September.
quiet ones that we have to watch out for. Yeah, you know.
I've been uploading for Speaking Freedom TV for the last 6.5 months. And so far, we are at over 275,000 total views on Vimeo. So I think it's going pretty well. It it hit different because I normally coach people through this phase, but it's like one of those it's like, okay, so what does this really mean type of feel for me. Because like I I came into doing what I do already at a good point, stable financially. So for it to grow for me now, I kind of have to feel the impact of the growth for me to be able to really measure it. Because it's not I'm not excited about the views as much. I mean, it's cool, but I want to see something that's going to be like life changing to where I can say, "Oh yeah, since this happened, I've seen this type of change." But um yeah, I enjoy the process of building, but even with what I'm doing with Speaking Freedom and Speaking Freedom TV, the goal is to eventually incorporate an adult exposure education to people so that they can see the different things that are available, what people actually like and what they don't like. Um and then it's so crazy because for me as a straight woman, I find women attractive just like I find men attractive. I'm sitting here trying out of these new terms that they get. I'm trying to figure out which term I fit into because they just been made up terms for everything. I can't even think a woman is pretty without it being a sexual nature type of term versus it's like, we should be attracted to humans on a human level. Like a man should be able to call another man handsome and it not be like, well, oh hey, that means it's gonna be something at the end of the day. Like, no, like that's just a nice looking person. And nowadays that's not really embraced. So the goal is to kind of encompass that into um the soul growth that I focus on.
As
See,
I hear Dr. Casey talk, it also reminds me at one point when men start wearing their ears pierced, that was a change in sexual behavior because the first attitude was that the person was gay if they wore their ears pierced. Then if it was in the
Miss
right
Sims,
earring
Mi- mi- mi-
ear,
mi-
they were gay and things like that, and
Depends on
they
which
didn't
ear.
hug.
yeah,
Yeah,
The handkerchief
it
thing
depended upon which year, but also, Miss Sims, if you go back to our beginnings and you look at the kings of our Black Africa, we have always adorned ourselves
yeah,
with
Yep.
yeah,
piercings
yeah,
and
yeah,
medals
yeah,
and different things. So
yeah, yeah.
this is not something that was new,
Right, right.
but but
It's a
one thing
cultural thing.
but one thing I do want to ask you, Brother Williams, because it's a thing that I haven't quite come to grips with, and we've talked about the soft side of men and all like that, but the feminization of black males, especially, I think that it has become fashionable to show men that are more in tune with their feminine side than it is to actually show men that are manly men for any other uh, uh, description. Uh, you know, Dr. Casey's favorite thing is, all of a sudden Will Smith grew a pair of balls and slapped somebody, but
he probably already had them balls, but he haven't
no, he ain't
imaged.
had the, he ain't
They
had
had to
them,
keep them.
he ain't
They
had
was
No,
them
tucked.
no.
balls.
They was tucked away.
Them balls was
If you
so far up, they was part of his Adam's apple. But anyway,
if
go, go,
you
go.
knew how the industry is, if you like really worked in the industry, once you create a image, anything that wavers away from that
Yep.
image, they will persecute you. That's
Yep.
why I said every time I think about this now, all I keep hearing is I'm not black, I'm OJ. Okay, because people forget that they are black until they piss the white people off and then they get checked and realize, you know what, I am still black and they will not fuck with me if I do one little thing. The thing with Will Smith is his whole career, he has been squeaky damn clean. And he do one little act of aggression and now they ready to end this whole thing after all 20, 30 years of being very calm, very key, very I'ma laugh at people while they laughing at me. They not
if
laughing with
if
Will
you act
Smith.
if you act like Samuel Jackson in Django for 23 years, you can't all of a sudden become Django.
Yes, you
Go
can
go
because that
go ahead,
is who
Mr.
he is
Williams.
behind the scenes. The person that we seen is probably how he really fucking act, and we just used to him being this goofball, and now we just seen the real him, and now we surprised. No, that's been Will. Will just know how to hide that shit for the camera.
He's from West Philadelphia. He was taught to be.
He's
I
from
mean,
Germantown. Yeah, he's from Germantown. Don't try that. I got families from South Philly. Don't try that. He's from Germantown. So go ahead, Mr. Williams.
well,
It's
wherever he's from, just his
he's
personality.
from a white suburb of Philadelphia,
That don't
Germantown.
mean that he ain't never been through nothing, that he ain't never been through
I
nothing.
didn't say that he didn't.
Like
I'm just saying that
people
Philadelphia thing don't
discredit
work.
being from the suburb. You can be from the suburb and still have to go through some tough ass shit. Your
I
suburb might be a
I,
tough ass suburb.
I
But then also
understand
being
that.
from
Like
the
just
suburb,
because
he's been taught to behave in front of white people. You have to behave a
his
specific
whole
way in
life
front of white
he's
people.
been
You have
performing
to.
Well,
I
let me interject my little part here. If y'all just remember, I'm just thinking about that as far as his music career, and that's what I can refer back to, James, going to your initial question about the whole softness aspect in the hip hop music industry, and I would even go as far as back as the Zulu Nation, and it came out that people didn't know that Africa Bambata was actually molesting people, molesting kids. And so the hip hop industry itself did fashion itself around a lot of that type of environment. Even you can go back and look at stuff like Will Smith's son, where he would go out and wear dresses, and even Tyler the Creator, he has a purse line, a male purse line, looks just like purses that any woman will wear, but it's bags for men that look exactly and you carry them exactly like a woman carries a purse. And so when I was talking about the whole uh, gay agenda, which I don't, like I said earlier, I don't know if I call it an agenda. The whole thing is blurring the lines between masculinity and feminism in regards to that, and it's almost making the game is to make a gender neutral approach to a lot of the things that go on. And I think a lot of this may even just have to do with capitalism, from the standpoint of being able to sell the same things to a man that you sell to a woman, and get both genders to buy up things, especially as it applies to the music industry and applies to capitalism. I mean, I feel like a lot of that may be the influence, but at the same time, what does it mean and how does it speak to us, especially black men, in terms of relationships as it applies to within your household? Just say if you have a male and a female in the same household, who has what role? And what happens is you start having this mix up in terms of who brings what to the family. So no longer does a man represent security or represents being the one that brings, puts the food on the table or the economics on the table. It could be either one of them. So it's like the roles between even within a household are neutralized, and so now it could go either way. And if I was watching a video the other day, I think 2 days ago, that they was actually explaining what organization was it? It was the Rothschilds. They referenced the Rothschilds was actually behind financing the feminist movement because it allowed them to now tax change the tax bracket, because when the United States was early in its development, women didn't pay taxes. And so the Rothschilds wanted to find a way to be able to actually incorporate a larger tax bracket within the United States government, and so that the government can grow. So they basically helped introduce the whole idea of that movement from the standpoint of being able to now all of a sudden you are doubling the amount of citizens that are taxing, you're doubling the amount of revenue that you're going to be able to gain. And that actually changed the whole economic structure now to where it took two people within a household to raise a household. So now all of a sudden you started this whole skyrocket incline in terms of the economics that it took to just maintain a house. Whereas before, it only would take one person economically to be able to put food on the table. Now, all of a sudden, when they changed it and made it to where it takes two working parents, then the idea now is that you can charge more and you can from an economic standpoint, cause inflation to go up more. So again, a capitalistic perspective may have been the position and the reason for doing so. So we have to look at things a different way and recognize the deception that goes along with a lot of things that's happening. It ain't. I don't think it's so much about literally what's going on between two people. It's the agenda is typically driven by capitalism, driven about dollars, driven about what you can get people to do. And I really feel like that's the end game is to basically create more revenue when it goes down to it.
And this is tapping into what Mr. Williams is saying, and I'm speaking from my experience through the years when the discussion got to be in regards to the gay community and people coming out of the closet, and a lot of people were going back and forth with various topics and saying, And I said to myself, well, in order for me to get a handle on this, let me just stop and listen to the larger gay population. What are they saying? What aspects are they coming from? What do they want us, the straight community, to know? What do they want politicians to know? And two things came out of my listening. And one of them fits into what Mr. Williams is saying. There were a class of within the gay community and population of the upper echelon where the money was, and those that were gay, they were gay, but they decided to stay in the closet and but still live a gay lifestyle within that community that agreed to stay in the closet and cited. And then there was a part of the gay population that came out of the closet. They were glad to come out of the closet. A lot of those people I thought were being oppressed for being gay and stuff. And some of them became more flagrant out in like the gay pride communities, and that grew, and that part of that population, like any population, would do foolish things and extreme things. But in listening to just the gay population per se, I heard two different voices coming out of that community itself, and one of them fit the profile that Mr. Williams is saying, and that played into money and political gain and political movement. And then the other was like the everyday people that had been oppressed, and they felt a relief to be able to express themselves, like Honey Believe was saying, in terms of things that she was feeling and growing up, and you know, she probably had to silently, go through a lot of things until whatever her experience was to tap into someone that maybe help work her way through it or whatever. That's been my experience.
Humblebee, how do you agree with Miss Sims or not?
To an
Uh,
extent, I know that with my experience, like I said, I there's no one in my family that's gay. I grew up in Florida for the most part, Jacksonville, Duval County at that, where it's a military town. And at that time, early 90s, it's the don't ask, don't tell. You're not supposed to be gay. You're not supposed to talk about it. Um, and then I came back home to California, and I'm dealing with my Puerto Rican side is Catholic, my black side is Baptist, and both sides I have everyone telling me, it's the devil, it's the devil, it's demons, you need to fix yourself. I did everything I could to possibly, as they say, fix myself and make myself a better person and make myself straight. um
I have a question.
mhm.
So, because of
Sorry,
your
I want to see you, so all right, is there a way we can see everybody?
All right, James.
Yeah, I like to see faces when I have a question.
go ahead with your question.
so, when you say that your family is extremely religious, is it that nobody else has come out or explored the possibility that they could be gay and in fear of being condemned, or is it that nobody has really ever had those feelings ever? Because it sounds like, and not just in your family, in general, up amongst the religious community, that even if they had that feeling, they would, they shun themselves, they make themselves feel bad about it to where they convince themselves that this can't be how they really feel.
At that time, at that age, I didn't know anything about anyone possibly being gay or lesbian. I'm not gonna say a family member's name, but
Right, right,
there
right.
was there was a particular family member after me being out. I think I was about 22, and this person invited someone who they were dating to a party that they knew I was going to be at. And that person came to that party and was like, "Oh, I know exactly who your family member is. You look just like them, and I'm dating them." And it was literally even at that point when, mind you, I have been open since I was maybe about 12, 13. That at that point I didn't care. My whole family disown me if you want to. I've tried. I cannot be what you want me to be. But it was even at that point that I realized, because of the religion, because of how everyone chastised who you are, is whether it's affecting you in your own household or not, they would chastise you for who you are. The second that person walked up to me in that party and said, "This is your family member, this is the person that I'm dating, you look just like them," automatically I shut down,
Mm.
because I was just like, okay, yes, I'm out of the closet, but now you just outed someone else in front
Yeah.
of people that I know. And that's why I'm just like, when people say, like, it's a social status, like, people come out the closet, people do this, and people are gay because they want to be seen. It's not always that way. It's 100% not always that way. I grew up poor and didn't see gay people. First time I ever saw gay people was when, um I think it was actually my fault. I wrote, back in early 90s, you wrote letters in classes. I was writing letters back and forth to my friend, confess my feelings, and then we were still writing letters back and forth, and my mom found a note.
Mm.
And that's when she asked me, she's like, "Is this how you feel? I need you to be 100% honest with me." Luckily for me, my mom, she grew up Catholic, but she was more open to understand who I was. So I had my mom. That was it. Both sides of my family, the Catholic side, they were like, "This is absolutely not okay." The Baptist side is not okay. So, you know, on both sides, I have everyone in my ear telling me that what you are doing is not okay. This is not acceptable. You've never seen this. Where are you getting this from? My TV was filtered. Back then it was Nickelodeon, KPBS. None of that stuff was shown on any of that. So I go to this party and this person announces a family member who is very direct with me, and I I shut down. And
But
then that's when I realized, like, even if you are someone who is openly gay, who does not care what people think about you, you're okay with people walking away from you, walking out of your life. When other people find out about other family members, you know that it's going to be that whole cycle all over again where everyone talks about you. So that's why I do not believe that it is a social status. In Hollywood, possibly, absolutely,
Yeah,
yes.
in Atlanta too.
Yeah,
well,
I
no,
was
Yeah,
getting,
no,
I was getting ready, I
yeah.
was getting ready
let me.
to remind people of um, give an example. What I was speaking about are two different people, uh,
Two different status.
two different thinkings of the same populations of people. If you remember during the AIDS crisis, a lot of people, celebrities like Rock Hudson and stuff, and people that contracted AIDS did not realize that they were uh, gay or anything like that. But when they became ill, that brought more out. A lot of the people that weren't out in the closet weren't out of the closet, but a certain group of people knew who they were, etc., etc. Then once they became ill, the general population, I mean, was out there,
It's kind
but
of crazy that the
they were
stereotype
out.
is
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
relates
I,
gay and AIDS together, because people that are straight have AIDS too. So
yeah.
I
That's
get
true.
it.
yeah.
That's true. That's true. And
Let,
then
let, let,
we
let
had to
me.
learn about AIDS, and not just like you're saying. We had to learn about AIDS itself in regard just didn't gay people get it. It had to do with blood and etc. etc.
But the
So
thing is, back then, even when straight people would contract AIDS, their excuse was, "Oh, it comes from the closeted gay men."
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
That's
It
right.
I
could
That's
never
right.
remember
come
But
that.
from a straight person.
That's
It
right.
has to be,
let,
it was a gay man who gave a straight woman AIDS.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You're right.
Let me give you an example of my family dynamic. I had one cousin that was a football player, got a scholarship to an Ivy League college, uh, stayed there for quite some time. And I had another cousin that was a musician. Both of them had brothers. Now, the one that was a football player, when we knew that his little brother was gay, there was by no means as an acceptance. As a matter of fact, one night, me and my cousin beat a kid up real bad because he said that Jeffrey was gay. And we all knew that he was. But just the idea of his
Yeah.
brother being gay was a no no.
But why
Now,
y'all beat him
now,
up if
now,
y'all
wait,
knew he
wait,
was gay?
now, wait a minute. Now, hold it now. Now, my other cousin was a musician, and his brother was also gay,
Mhm.
but he came up in the church choir. So everybody accepted him. That was fine. But the but the cousin that played football, there was no way in the world that he could have a brother that was gay. So
But
this
why
is
y'all beat up the person that called him gay if y'all really knew that he was really gay?
because that was a matter of family pride, and we could not stand for him to call my cousin's brother gay. Whether he was gay or not, that was a reflection on us because we were those guys.
Well, I'll stand with you on that one because I think it was the seventh grade. My whole family knew I was gay, and there was a girl in my school who told everyone that I was gay, even though most of the people who were close to me they knew what it was, but she decided to tell everyone else, and my family told me that you need to defend yourself and tell them that you're not. So I did that, and she came up to me after school, and it was a really bad fight. But my family was so proud of me for defending the family's name to erase the gayness. And it was just like, at the end of the day, I'm still gay, but you guys are all so proud of
Right.
me because I fought her for saying that I'm gay.
Right. I'm just saying it's the way the dynamics have changed down through the years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's how we as a people have conditioned ourselves to accept one group and not the other. And it really
I don't. I
it,
was
it really
always
does us any good, and we see ourselves involved in mean and destructive and sometimes death to other people, because as you're talking I remember a lot of the young people like high school and whatever that actually got beat up and killed for being gay from other people in that community and things like that. You know, that I hear, that I would read about nationally and stuff like that. So coming out and letting other people know that you were gay. Some people got killed. Some people got beat up. Some people had to stand their ground and defend themselves. And so it can't be an easy thing to do that.
I can definitely say this as someone who grew up with two different religions in my family and someone who was told that what I was doing was wrong. I allowed that to affect me when I was about 18, to the point where I decided, okay, you know what? What I'm doing is so wrong. I'm going to try to force myself to be straight. So I told myself, you know what? I have a male friend. He and I always play sports together. I'm going to do the best I can to get drunk enough to make myself straight. And it didn't work. It was to the point where he and I are no longer friends because as much as I tried to make myself drunk to commit the heterosexual lifestyle, it didn't work. So that's why I become so passionate when I say you cannot force someone to change their sexuality. That people can go through certain things that make them question it, that is 100% understandable.
It's natural and normal.
Yeah, it's natural, it's normal. People, as a human, you are going to look at other humans and you are going to wonder, as you were saying earlier, Dr. Casey, as a woman, you can look at a woman and say that they're attractive. And as a woman who loves women, I can also look at a man and say that is an attractive man. But at that point in my life, because I was told that everything that I was doing wrong, I thought, okay, I mean, I can look at a man and say that's an attractive man. So maybe if I get drunk enough, I can force myself to become more than just, okay, you're attractive. Maybe I can force myself to become sexually attractive, emotionally attractive. And I pushed myself to a point where I went from, okay, I can say a man is attractive, and I'm gonna force myself to be more than just, open to knowing that humans are attractive. Force
Mm-hmm.
myself to say that they are sexually and emotionally attractive, to forcing myself into a situation of raped.
I can remember that at some point, one of my people that I work with within the organizer community, he asked me. He wanted to have his ears pierced, but he knew the stereotype was there, and so he asked me what I thought about it. And I had to remind him kind of what James had connected with. There have been cultures of people that have been having their ears pierced for years, and I think the example I gave him was kind of like sailors and pirates. And I thought of things that I knew he probably would have seen through the years. I said they've been wearing their. I think part of their initiation or whatever when they crossed the equator. I think a lot of the sailors would pierce their ears.
Yeah.
So men have been
Yep.
piercing their ears for years, and he stopped and thought about it. So the next time I saw him, he had his ears pierced,
Well,
and went on and thought nothing about it.
well,
And
I,
even
I,
in the music industry, I got to go refer back to that. Like when I was growing up, uh, my dad was heavy into Rick James, and if y'all can recall, Rick James had a style called punk funk, and he would pierce his ears and wear long boots. Now, I guarantee y'all people would think Rick James was gay, but he was nowhere near being gay
nowhere near.
We
at
talked about that
That
all.
earlier.
point. I
Yeah.
was
But
just about to
he,
Because
bring his
Prince
name
was like that
yeah,
into
too. Prince was like that too.
Yeah.
yeah, Prince is the same way. And see, I grew up watching my dad kind of dress like that. Not he didn't go as far as Prince, but he dressed like Rick James. And the deal is,
YG wears shoes with heels, with little heels on it, like one of that old school type of pimpish type of swag a little bit. Cause he be wearing his,
Mhm.
I mean, he be looking
Yeah.
crazy to me. I love YG, by the way. Let me put that disclaimer out there. But he be having his little heels and his little loafer heels, and he be like, but it's like a Cali sharp though. It's like something that you don't find everywhere.
Right. And so I kind of just jumping on what James was saying about that, and the concept of, like, when I was growing up, it hadn't the call somebody gay as it applied to hip hop had nothing really to do with whether they was a gay person, but the term gay itself meant that you was weak, meaning that you could be
yeah,
pushed over and that you could be bullied. And so for someone to call you gay
I
or
remember
sissy
that. Yeah.
was basically defined, just coming against your character and your manhood, meaning you wouldn't stand your ground. And Humblebee, I kind of think that ended up being in the same scenario, right? That the older generation felt like, oh, you can't let nobody call you gay. It had nothing to do with actually being gay. It's like basically saying that you won't stand your ground. You will let somebody push you over. And so that term, during my years in the late teens and early 20s, that's what it meant. And
Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to bring up, 2 points. I sent James a link to show I almost lost my job back when I worked for Nokia back in 1996, because I'm surfing the internet and trying to look up some politics, and I typed in whitehouse.com. Whitehouse.com in the 90s was a porn site.
Oh,
And that's because, again, the porn industry, a lot of people don't know that the internet was developed and became basically boomed because of the porn industry. That is what carried the internet, was the porn industry, period.
yeah, yeah,
And so the children nowadays have more of a chance to get exposed to those type of things. And so I think the direction in where they're going has a lot to do with that. And then let's not forget that Sesame Street, from the standpoint in
yeah.
June 2001, added its first gay couple
Yeah.
on Sesame Street. So it's just a different dynamic that we're living in now.
Yeah. Well,
And mentioning
and
Sesame
also,
Street, mentioning
if you want to
Sesame
go,
Street, I remember when it came out that the guy who did Elmo, something
He
came
was
out about his
he was a
job.
yeah,
child molester. That's
yeah,
different. He was a
yeah,
child
Okay,
molester.
okay, I didn't realize
yeah,
all
That's
the
yeah,
back
yeah.
end,
Let's not
but
correct
that's
that.
a whole new
That's
thing. Okay, but I remember
yeah,
just in that,
That's the
coming out
guy under
things
the
like
suit.
that.
That's the guy under the suit.
Okay,
Elmo wasn't a molester. The guy
right,
under the
right.
suit
under the
was.
suit. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
Well,
I
but
said. Who did Elmo? But I
one
didn't.
thing I
But
can
I
say
realized
about this,
he was in the news for something bigger than just being
yeah,
gay.
you
That
Demo.
he really, and
no,
you said he
yeah,
went down the ugly path. Yeah.
yeah. But as you mentioned, Brother Williams, I found that I could pierce my right ear twice, but I
Yeah,
couldn't pierce both ears
Yeah.
yeah.
because that was gay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
you know, but uh, great conversation that we've had. Why don't we start here? Miss Sims, why don't you give us your final thoughts? Then we'll go to Honeybee. Then we'll go to uh, Brother Williams and Dr. Casey. I'll let you take us home.
Okay.
Mhm. I guess I go back to kind of the beginning or the bottom line when I think of people, various cultures, green, white, Martian, purple, people eater. I always go before I think of start putting people in categories. I learn, like I told you all from I think it was Gene Elliott, people's behavior. People, we can influence people's behavior by saying certain words and things like that, and that's a control method. And so I think our conversation here has kind of proved that as a society of people during different times and for different people, our behavior has changed and fluctuated, and it's hurt various cultures, have has hurt us, our children, in regards to what we condition and how we relate or interrelate and do inhumane things to each other as a people. We need to be aware of that in regards of as we go forth and as we fight for our survival and things like that. The end.
Thank you as always, Miss Sims. Look forward to talking to you next Monday. Honeybee, we don't see a whole lot of you, but when you do come, you bring a lot to the table. Why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening?
one thing I can say for myself with tonight's topic is just basically as an openly gay woman who has been tried to be forced back into the closet over and over again, chastised for the things that I know make me. Um, I know that there's a lot of opinions out there on people who look like me. A lot of people think that a woman who looks like me, someone who dresses uh quote unquote masculine, even though I'm very feminine, very feminine, I dress comfortably. I'm one of those people when I hear girls say, "Oh, men did this, men did that, I'm gonna turn gay," I will be that number one person to tell you, please don't do it. You will have the same issues whether you no matter what identity you choose, you're going to have the same issues. And when it comes down to children in schools, children need to be children. Parents need to monitor their kids. Parents need to pay attention to where they place their kids, where you let your kids stay the night. Pay attention to the conversations that are having with your kid that are being had with your kids, because when it comes to sexual education in school, should be just that, the biologic, like it should be biology. Kids should be learning about what their bodies are getting ready to go through, not where you should stick your penis or where your finish go your mouth. So just know that if you start touching genitalias and you start, letting things touch your mouth, things can happen. But it doesn't. I feel like it should just be about biology. Stop sexualizing children. Period. Whether it comes to being gay or straight, just when straight people have their child sitting there and they sit there and look at a young girl and they say, "Oh, I know she's gonna be fast," or you look at a little boy and you say, "Oh, I know he's gonna be a heartbreaker," or you show little boys girls butts and stuff like that. You are sexualizing them at a young age. Let these children be children. Teach them what their body's going to go through. Teach them these, when you become sexually active, whatever it is that you choose to do, you don't have to be specific on what they choose to do, but just know that once you get to that age, and that should be later on, because you should be protecting your children and paying attention to what your children are around. Just teach them these are the possibilities, these are the diseases that you can get. And if you started early, or if you find out that your child is learning something at an early age, then that's when it is your responsibility as a parent to sit them down and say, okay, these are the things that can happen to you. But when it comes to gender specifics and actual sex, leave the children out of it. They don't need to learn it. That's all.
Thank you, Honey B. Brother Williams.
Well, what I like to just use again is a lot of my experiences as the backdrop. And I would say, definitely, like Honeybee was saying, monitor your children, because what I was introduced to basically by learning it or being exposed to it during the streets, I learned at an early age to hide sexuality from my parents, hide it from adults. And by being taught sex from a position of, is you need to make sure that the adults don't know that you know, and that's how I was exposed to it, then a child at that point would end up learning a whole lot more about it than they need to learn, because they're learning to be sneaky, they're learning to be conniving, and they're learning to how to navigate that the whole aspect of hiding what they're being exposed to from their parents, whether it be sex, drugs, or anything that's negative that can bring about trauma. So I would say we definitely need to be in the mindset, people, of monitoring our children, as well as helping to guide them. When you monitor your children or when you guide your children, it's not to condemn them or make them to push them to a point where they're afraid to have open conversations with you as an adult. That's one of the things I think that it's not emphasized enough, is that we need to be able to have a open lines of communication with our children, to the point to where they're not afraid of asking their parents a specific question without getting scolded for already having somewhat of an idea about what they asking. And I think that's where it comes into the fact that a child would have the mentality to hide certain things from an adult, from their parents, is because they might get in trouble by just bringing up the subject matter and already knowing to bring up the subject matter. And instead of the parent taking that as a teachable moment and using that to guide the child, they end up scolding the child, which makes the child now don't want to go to the parent for the information. And therefore, now it's going to be the streets that raise that child and educate that child on that subject matter. So going back to what Honeybee was talking about in terms of STDs, guess where you're gonna learn it from then? It ain't gonna be your parents that tell you what's really happening. It's gonna be you ended up with something, and now all of a sudden your parent having to take you to the doctor, which also happened not to me, but to one of my best friends when he was 8 years old. We all ran in a clique. We all hid sexuality. from our parents because of how we was exposed to it, and that is a dangerous thing when your children can get exposed to something to the position to where they are learning not to discuss it with adults. So let's be mindful. That's all.
Thank you so much, Brother Williams. Take us home, Dr. Casey.
This conversation has gone so many different directions, from Will Smith to a heavy emphasis on sexuality in the school system. And the biggest thing to kind of sum up what everybody said is, um, sexualizing any type of children activities or programming is very sick, because you're grooming children to be something that they're not prepared to become just yet, and that's bad. However, as age appropriate conversations come about, there does need to be some type of conversation and exposure, because the lack of exposure is what sends children into curiosity, which what sends children into sneaky behavior, which what sends children into promiscuity, to a point to where you get your hoes and you get a teen pregnancy and all of those things. It's kind of a trickle effect because of not being able to speak to a parent or a guardian or a close loved one. You have to go and you're trying to figure it out on your own, which makes you want to try things. But if you have a conversation, um, based on your child's age, based on who you know your child to be, because every 7-year old is not ready for that type of talk. But some 7-year olds have been in situations or exposed to things to where they need that. But you, as the parent, should make those decisions about when to converse with your children about those things. Embrace them, make them feel loved, make them feel understood, make them feel heard, so that they don't run to their friends. Because it's so funny. My son is 13, and he was talking about he go to his friend for advice, and I'm like, son, what is another 13-year-old going to tell you? Hey, well, he's a couple days old, but he doesn't. I mean, and his friend is the smartest person in his class. I mean, like literally got an award for being the smartest person, but he hasn't lived enough life yet, son, to be going and giving you advice. And I kind of laughed because it was funny to me, but he's like, no, but mom. And that is what you need to avoid. Your children thinking that a friend can take them or tell them something, because you're it's the blind leading the blind, and somebody needs sight, and that sight comes from insight, and that insight comes from conversation. There's a lot of things that I was exposed to as a child. I had people that attempted to molest me, that tried to molest me, that was successful at molestation, in which it led me to touching people and people touching me. Um, but I also remember, and I heavily remember this more now than ever, my mother used to always try to shield me. If something went weird at somebody's house, I was not allowed to go over that person's house no more. Like, I remember, one of her friends, I spent it at one of her friends' house, and me and a friend's daughter took a bath together. I never ever went to that person's house to spend a night anymore, ever. I don't care where they lived at after that. That was automatically off the table, because that was weird. And my mom was like, no weird stuff. So anytime somebody did something weird, she would take me from that environment. And it was that shielding that is, I'm kind of proud of now, because it's a lot of things that I have never done that a lot of women do all the time, and I'm like, ooh, I got something that I can give my husband and ain't nobody else had before, while all these other women's out here just flaunting it around. But the things that I didn't experience came from my mama shielding me, and me, I was that person like, oh, if something going crazy, let me go ahead. It's time for me to head out. And I never experienced a lot of things because I would always head out. But if you teach your children that if they feel uncomfortable to head on out, it's a lot of things that they won't be exposed to. So sometimes those conversations is just not to teach them about what to expect, but also teach them what to avoid, what to miss out on. That there is, it's okay to not be cool. It's okay to, when everybody over here doing one thing, to go off and excuse yourself, because sometimes you will be put in situations that you will have to have self control in. One of my biggest fears right now is being cool with anybody, but women in particular, and being in a situation where I'm somewhere and I get drunk with somebody and then they want to take advantage of me. Those are the things that I fear as a 40-year-old adult. So I can only imagine what children have to think about growing up in environments where drugs and alcohol and all these things are present. So know your boundaries, know what you like, know what you don't like, all of those things that normally apply to every other area, but it also needs to apply to sex. Get information. Go watch some porn. I know your religion or whoever you serve or whatever you into might say is bad, but guess what? You need to know what is out there in the world, because somebody is condemning you, telling you that you shouldn't like this or you shouldn't want that. I don't care if you want two women. I don't care if you want two men. I don't care if you want a man and a woman. There is somebody in this world that wants to give you exactly what you want. Don't force it. Don't manipulate. Don't settle. Be you. Understand who you are at your core. Take off everything that people told you to be, and discover who you are, and then live your life to the foolish and to the fullest, not foolish, and get what you really want. Don't hold back. Don't deny yourself, but learn yourself so that you can appropriately accept you for who you really are.
When
Dr.
Dr.
Casey,
Yep.
Dr. Casey, you know that right now we have been banned by every Muslim country in the world. So
Well, we was already banned when we was talking about all the stuff in the beginning.
When Dr. Casey, I had to smile to myself when Dr. Casey was talking about her son and his friend, and that was an example when what I mean when I say children aren't little adults; they grow into adults. So I had to
And I
smile to
don't care how
myself.
smart you are either. You can have a 4 point whatever. You are
They're
still a
not little.
child. You
They're
haven't
not.
experienced enough going.
They're not little adults. They're not.
all right, everyone.
All
Well,
right.
great conversation this evening. Maybe we can expand on it sometime sooner, but I thought we might want to talk about something other than Ukraine or January 6th. So
Thank you, James. Thank you, James.
have a great night, everyone.
Peace
I'll
and
talk
love
to you
till the
again.
next time. Good night. Good
Love
night.
people.
Uh, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.